So no one is really advocating with a straight face to invade Russia and take out Putin. So at some point, you're cutting a deal. He is getting away with it. What that's going to look like is up to the parties involved.
So recently, Michael Malice went on the Prager U podcast to talk about how he believes the war in Ukraine must end because it's been one of the ploys to keep the U.S. involved in this war, using Ukraine as a proxy against Russia to say, well, you can't let Putin get away with it. Well, I want to hear what he has to say about this, so let's watch and let's react.
How do you think Donald Trump is doing on the world stage? There are a lot of moves over there, specifically given how much you've studied Russia.
Sure. So one of the things that Trump is doing very well, and hear me out, I know people listening to this are going to lose their minds. Calm down.
If you say the word Ukraine, Russia, that's going to be...
North Korea did very well for decades by coming off as crazy. And one of the things I talk about in my book, Dear Reader, I walk through the system and go, this is a very cleverly designed program that they put in place for decades. There's a reason they outlasted everybody else, except for Cuba. This is not by accident. Boris Johnson did this when he was negotiating Brexit, because he just admitted this recently in his autobiography. He goes, I told them if I have to do a no-deal Brexit and just walk, I'm going to do it. He's like, I never would have done that. That's crazy. But they believed it. So when you are perceived, and we've all had maybe that ex-girlfriend, ex-boyfriend, colleague that you have to work with, and they're a crazy person, you don't want to negotiate with them because you're like, I don't like me and you. I'm confident if you and I had to have some kind of discussion or argument, it would be fine. You know?
I don't know. I'm pretty crazy.
Yeah, but you're not North Korea crazy.
No.
Right. You're not Trump crazy in the sense that calling Denmark and being like, yeah, we're getting Greenland, whether you like it or not. And she's like, haha, goes, I'm not kidding. So that is...
And everybody is like, wait, did he actually mean it? Right. I think he actually meant it.
Right. That is something I absolutely love.
Yeah.
Well, it does become problematic when it spills over into policy, like bombing Yemen to send a signal to Iran, which is what a lot of Trump supporters and Trump himself implied in his Truth Social post. But Malice is right. I think Trump's best moment in his first term was actually easing tensions with North Korea, normalizing relations with North Korea. And we all know that North Korea, was perceived as crazies, a bunch of crazies, especially the Kim family and the Kim dynasty. But Trump's gotten that reputation too at times, and that was a great moment for him. Let's hope for more, especially on the Ukraine front.
Yeah.
Because these other countries are always going to have this weird inferiority complex about America. So I think it's a good thing that they got a little too comfortable. And I like that they're getting uncomfortable, and let them have their little coffee clatches and tut. But I can't believe America elected President Trump. We're the big dog. We should act like it.
Do you think it's possible that Donald Trump would be able to resolve the Russia-Ukraine war? And
yes.
What do you think, if you could just digest for us, let's put it in our clay pots in history, what do you think went down there?
I don't think anyone knows, and I think that's by design, right? Like whatever's going on behind the scenes with Zelensky, we can't have that public because Putin reads those papers, same as vice versa. I think a deal could have been cut a long time ago. I think it seems to me, although people disagree with this, so I could be wrong, I'm not an authority in this area in contemporary times, it seemed to me that there was a gun to Zelensky's head being like, you can't settle. And there was a huge incentive for a lot of people to keep this war going for a long time. I think the losses are horrific. My only hope is that it gets resolved as quickly as possible without one more life being lost. I don't know what the win condition is for the Ukraine side, because people are like, we can't let Putin get away with this, blah, blah. Not getting away with this means taking Putin out. Because even if he loses everything that he fought for, the borders returned back to where Russia started, he did get away with it. He had no consequences, right? So no one is really advocating with a straight face to invade Russia and take out Putin. So at some point, you're cutting a deal. He is getting away with it. What that's going to look like is up to the parties involved, what cost to come with bearing. But this kind of World War II model or Iraq War model, that the only way wars are resolved is with complete domination, destruction, is really, I think, a bad idea.
That is such a great point. I'm so glad he said that, because that's the conception that Americans always have when going into these forever wars that becomes so. That was the win condition for Afghanistan, and the goalpost always shifts. It was to remove the Taliban, and then it was to rebuild, and then it was to stay and provide security for 20 years. Meanwhile, billions of dollars and hundreds of thousands of lives were lost, and the US eventually replaced the Taliban with the Taliban. And that's how a lot of these forever wars have gone. Malice is so on point here because that is the propaganda that neocons and the war establishment always use. Like, we can't let him get away with this, as if no war can be completed on amiable terms via negotiation, that it always has to be total domination by one power over the other, which actually is pretty rare in the history of war. There's almost always concessions, and the neocons don't like that fact, and that's why they don't want to negotiate an end to this war. I have my doubts as to whether Trump will really end the war or whether it will just be a result of European involvement and just getting U.S. support out of there. My end game is just to withdraw all U.S. support. I think a peace would inevitably follow from that, but I think Trump's ego is so big that he wants this on his legacy, that he's the one that secured peace. But I don't think it's possible when the U.S. restores aid to Ukraine. We're just viewed as a belligerent by Russia, and I don't see an end to it.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem to be the president's
No, not at all.
vision either at all. What do you think the U.S.'s role should be on the world stage? I mean, you see this even on the right, even though I know you're not a conservative, but you see this on the left where people say, we have our own problems here in the United States. We don't need to get involved in wars outside of the United States. We don't need to fund both sides of the war. You're an anarchist.
Sure.
So what's your observation when it comes to America getting involved in foreign wars?
I'm as opposed to it as possible, but what I'm in favor of, and which is happening organically and naturally, is American cultural imperialism. People around the world watch American movies, American TV shows, American music, things like this. We have fondnesses for other nations when we interact with them and their culture. America has enormous fondness for our arch enemies, the Japanese. So much of Japanese culture has come here. So much of American culture has taken root in Japan, things like this. So that, I think, is a great source of American strength and a great source of world peace. If you and another culture like each other, respect each other, you're not going to go to war.
I think this is such a good point. I'm so glad to see him, giving the two best points on this that I've seen. The neocons are big on thinking that the best way to export our values and export our system of governance throughout the world is the war machine. It's regime change and exporting democracy at the point of the bayonet. But as Malice said here, the way to do it voluntarily, to sow goodwill, to become an attractive place to a lot of people, is actually through cultural influences, cultural phenomena. We see that in Japan, but it's not just in Japan. It's in parts of Europe and Germany too, where, good nature goes a long way. And we haven't been at war with Germany for a long time, and war with Japan for a long time, but it sure seems like there's better relations between peoples when things are done voluntarily and you're not just trying to spread your values at the point of the bayonet. It never leads to any gain of any tangible benefit to the American taxpayer.
Or it's much less likely that you're going to go to war. I think it's crazy that we have military bases in like Germany and South Korea and all these other places. I would be strongly in favor of pulling them back as much as possible.
Yeah, that's right. Take all the troops, bring them home, bring all the resources from the military across the world back home. Treat the military for the purpose it's supposed to serve, and that is to protect the United States, not to empire build, not to exert our worldview among other powers, not to rattle sabers with nuclear powers with China and Russia. It doesn't make any sense. Let's stop this involvement in the Middle East, shut down all foreign-based U.S. bases, etc. That's the non-interventionist worldview that kept America free for essentially over a century. The Monroe Doctrine was essentially that. And Europe fought, dozens of wars during that time, whereas we prospered economically through negotiation and trade. It seems like a different world now because now we've asserted an American empire. I don't say we as in me and you. I say the U.S. government, which I'm not complicit in. I don't want to admit any complicity in what the evils they do. But as far as Malice said, I think the endgame win condition for Ukraine cannot include any of the Donbass territory that Russia is settled in or Crimea that Russia is occupying. There's no way to dislodge Russia from that territory at this point, short of sending U.S. forces on the ground in a hot war, which I don't think anyone's willing to do. Not even the Democrats are willing to do that. You see a few European politicians and EU officials kind of beating their chest in, implying that they would do that, but that's a whole lot of smoke where there's no fire. I don't think that's going to happen. This is going to take negotiation, and restoring aid to Ukraine isn't going to cut it. That was the wrong decision. Trump's fatal error of this term so far, in my mind, is having that showdown with Zelensky in the Oval Office, which was the best Trump that I've ever seen, the best Trump of this term, saying, you're gambling with millions of lives, you're gambling with World War III, and sending him home without a mineral deal, cutting off aid, only to restore it a few days later. It doesn't make sense. It's not America first. That's not the mandate he was elected for, and it needs to change. But let me know down in the comments below, how do you think the war will end between Ukraine and Russia? Let me know in the comments. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire, even against Russia. I'll take care, everyone. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.